another episode of the Blank Canvas. Today's a bit of a different day. So typically, what I do with these quick shots here, I'll move the mic down. So real quick, Blank Canvas is a project around AI and accessibility, impacting real business infrastructure and driving revenue to a business, specifically by building out its sales infrastructure. That's been the bread and butter. What I am doing with this project is incorporating an entry offer, an intro offer, I would say, not entry, but intro, incorporating marketing automations. The way I'm doing that is essentially deploying those exact marketing automations on myself and building in public, documenting live. Like I mentioned, today's a bit different. I've, for the longest while, my mind has been really focused on doing things well and kind of like really looking at how to not put myself in my measure of self-importance or my idea of how I should show up in the world too high on kind of my focus, because it changes with time and it's self-aggrandizing and it doesn't really serve much, especially for the project and what its purpose is. Especially driving, as a sole proprietor, I pretty much from a brand standpoint as well as my own individual standpoint, I try my best not to harbor any sort of anger or frustration. But I wanted to be very candid because I want to speak about a project that's on my plate. It's been on my plate for a while, 2 months now in the works, a voice agent project specifically. So this is an interesting one. I've built 11 voice agents in the span of past 2 years, and 3 of them have been paid. I will say the biggest one being a 5K UST project, which I've spoken about in the past for a Medicare provider. And it's funny because some people will hear that and are like, wow, that's amazing. That sounds like a great place to be. The reality is, and it's kind of what I want to touch on today, is I've spent the past 2 months building this voice agent for a brokerage. And it's like the amount of unbillable hours are insane. I've also picked up a lot in terms of like skill sets to kind of improve it as I'm going along. That being JavaScript, wrapping my head around like how that kind of exists amongst the whole thing. Like I'm no pro by any means, and a large part of what I do is very no code focused. But I had a lot of interesting conversations around intelligence systems and how, for longevity purposes, how it's important to kind of take into account their different dimensions and domains, especially in how they influence a business, which is really, really, really interesting. And it's something I just wanted to harp on. I feel like there's a lot of burnt hours that you can experience in this. I've also been looking at like this information economy, and a large part of what I'm doing while building in public is also showcasing it and introducing it to people. I've been resistant towards kind of giving, I have like little cheat sheets and little like prompts and like tutorials and things, which I think are really impactful and really like value driven. But to charge people and then charge them for information, or even just the aggregation of information, and then a kind of presentation layer, right? Some kind of course, mini course, that kind of, overarching formula, is something that just keeps coming up over and over again. And I'm marinating in it because I don't want to be disauthentic and, say one thing and then do the other. I'm very much here, like I said, building in public daily, showcasing, giving as much. And I'm looking at ways to like really not just build revenue for myself internally in meaningful ways, because it's very, again, self-aggrandizing, but to contribute to the space in a way that is actually meaningful and new. So that leads us into what I'm going to cover today. So touched upon this briefly yesterday. Kind of the game plan, you would say. So practicing these marketing automations internally on myself, specifically for market research, and being very clear about my personalization. I've done a lot of lifting on that to get to the point of offer ideation, specifically for how am I going to package things, how am I going to present them. And I'm actually, it's funny, as I'm learning that, I'm looking at what I'm doing on YouTube and I'm like, there's so many so many improvements I can do, especially when it comes to the packaging, because like, hooks and all that stuff are all like, that's what drives retention. That's what drives engagement, I would say. And it, I do believe like what I'm sharing is something substantial, but the framework of like, okay, it may be useful, but in the way that the packaging can keep it away from people that would benefit from it the most. And that's something I'm conscious of. So that packaging piece is a large focus. And tomorrow, Wednesday, I'd say, I'll be doing a longer kind of iteration. So solid like hour, 2 hour recording, where I build a website live. And I'll actually be incorporating a lot of things in play. One that I'm excited to kind of play with here is ChatGPT agent mode. I had been doing a good amount of sifting, and I'm really looking to like build my knowledge graph profile. In order to do that, I got to update the website, obviously. So that landing page is going to hold a lot of different kind of purposes. And I'm also this Friday going to be attending a workshop myself on Lovable to like create UIs and like actual interactive app media, things like that, which is going to be really cool. Upskilling is always, a fantastic piece. And from there, it also leads me into showcasing the outreach I'll be doing. So that email campaign, that social media outreach, affinity, those partnerships, all that stuff, documenting very live in these kind of like trailing days. And then I'm going to do something at the end of these like 30-day mark where I'm like, here's what I did for the last 30 days. Here's what's leading me for the next. And a lot of those kind of like milestone pieces of content pillars, you would say, right? I will say this sort of offer ideation piece I'm not approaching it in a prescriptive way. In fact, I'm actually approaching it more so in the framework of like, what's the best way to show this? Down here is probably the best. In the framework of I've built, I used to be digital marketing, website design, SEO work back in the pandemic. And I've, done deep study, I suppose, if that means much, on offer ideation. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean much until there's conversions, right? And I feel like part of why I prefixed today's piece with how I felt was because I didn't want to approach this authentically with an overcompensating sense of confidence. There are days like this where I feel a bit more deflated. I feel like the projects I'm working on and some things I'm doing, like it can feel not motivating sometimes because they get shot down. That doesn't stop the train. It takes a lot more to do that. Knock on wood to find that out. But I very much like, let me pull back the big screen. I've done a lot of free work and I'm learning to unlearn the bias that comes up in my body whenever more unbillable hours pop up. It's the nature of project work that scope creep is part of the equation. And if your intent at the end of the day is to deliver something of quality, you have to drop the ego in that essence. And I feel like today is one of those days where like I'm humbled by that. Like I did a demo, just like any, you swing the bat 100 times, it's going to miss 90. The 10 that lands is going to be great. But out of those 90 that miss, some of them in the crowd boos. Sometimes the demo gets an ugly kind of response, and that can hurt. And you can kind of feel that, you can internalize that, you can take it as like, what does that mean of me? And that's just it's self-aggrandizing, it's ego-driven, and that's kind of what I wanted to prefix, especially as I'm walking into this next little bit where I'm showcasing and I'm building in public. There are days like this, and that's okay. That's part of the process. So that all being said, my excitement continues. The smooth jazz continues. Maybe it'll be more funky than smooth, who knows? But I'm really excited for tomorrow. So tune in for that. We'll do some cool copy work, and as well as kind of playing on some, I mentioned like dimensions and domains of businesses and understanding how different things kind of impact that. So it'd be really cool to revisit that as economic models and how that drives economic development. A dime for every time I say economic. Anyways, yeah. So really excited for this. See you guys in the next one.